So, JamesEvangelical99, you asked what religion, if any, I am, and my ethnic background, my ancestry, things like that. The reason I don't talk about that is because I don't want people to make prejudgments about my character. I don't want people to presume that I think the way I do because I'm either a Christian or an atheist or a Muslim or things like that. I figure if I leave that relatively neutral, it allows people to make their own assessments, and then from there they can decide for themselves whether or not the content that I say holds any merit. And I worry that by just saying outright how I feel on religious and ethnic matters, that it would somehow deter from that. I suppose the ethnic one wouldn't, but there are a lot of racists out there. And I'll just say this much, that I am not completely white. I think you can kind of tell through my physical characteristics, but yes, while I do have white in me, Caucasian, I am of mixed race. And while I won't go into full detail about that mixed race, I will say that I can go out in the sun and not get sunburn. As pale as I am, I could go out in the sun and maybe get a little pink. So I call myself a day walker. But essentially, as far as religion goes, I don't know, because a lot of people would point out about how in the past I called myself a Satanist, and to this day, I still heed the words of Anton LaVey. The thing is, most LaVeyan Satanists are just ignorant of what Anton LaVey was trying to condone. Anton LaVey was either an agent provocateur, or he got it and was afraid of the consequences of just delving too deep into it. Delving too deep into the implications of the personal psionic field that is the human mind. And, you know, why would someone that's basically an atheist need to be so flamboyant about it? Why would an atheist need to have invocations to summon Belphegor or Asmodeus or any of these other archdemons? That makes no sense. You could say that this is like a ritual to relieve yourself of these harnesses, of these inhibitions of Christian indoctrination, but people seem to have no problem doing that now. People seem to relatively live their life, despite a Christian upbringing, guilt-free and just doing what they're going to do. So I don't see how that is necessary. And yes, this was written like back in the 60s, so maybe then it was a little more apparent, but no one was claiming to be a Satanist, and society still managed to deter away from Christian doctrination. So clearly that's not the issue here. What I think the issue here is Anton LaVey was advocating personal magic and, personal energy. It's a New Age concept. If you look up pretty much any New Age conspiracy theorists and shit, they will go into quantum physics and how you as the individual can affect reality on some minor scale through self-awareness. Like, if you were to see the neutrons vibrating around, to just be aware of it would bring some semblance of order to their spontaneous movement. Whereas if you were not aware of it, they would just spontaneously combust or spontaneously reproduce or whatever. In other words, when there is not something sentient to be aware of the presence of the universe is naturally chaotic. But when there is intelligent life form, all of a sudden there is the introduction of order and stability. Which is why most quantum physicists do not come right out and say there can't be a God, because that would establish some order within the universe, that God was the first intelligent being, and by extension, everything else came to fruition. So the way I look at it is, whether or not what I believe in, that's not important. What's important is the principles of which we entail. The principles we leave behind and strengthen before we die. That's what's important. So, I don't go into much detail about my religious beliefs because I'll put it this way. If there is a life after death, I don't know what's going to happen. So I cannot, in good judgment, tell you what to do to prepare or how to live your life or anything like that when I don't know. But on the same token, what I do know is how this world is being affected right now based off the predominant principalities with which we live by. So that's what I worry about. And if by extension that affects our afterlife, then all the more so to worry about it. But to my knowledge, the way we feel and think and act now is having lots of damage right here, right now, with no need of an extraterrestrial or supernatural force behind it. And, I do tend to pray to a God. I say a God, I mean the God. I pray to Yahweh. I pray to a God, the God of justice, life, and progress. I pray to the God above all other gods. But does this mean that I personally believe in a life after death? I don't think so. Like, I want to believe, but at the same time, I don't. Because to believe in a life after death is to accept the possibility of an even greater fate than death. Because, think about it. Hell, well, I wouldn't even consider hell the greatest possible doom. Like, everyone worries of well, that's what modern Christians seem to advocate, that if you do not accept Christ, that you will burn in hell forever and ever, pain and suffering. Okay, yeah, that's bad. But you know what's even worse in my opinion? The loss of your ego. The loss that there is no life after death, and that you just rot in the ground, and that all your memories, all your feelings, all your actions in life were worthless and mean absolutely nothing, and that there is no order to the universe. That all of this is basically just a sophisticated dream, and that when you die, it means absolutely nothing. And not only does it mean nothing, but you will not even be aware of the fact that it means nothing, because you will be nothing too. To just fathom that pure emptiness is enough to drive some people mad. And that to me would seem worse than this idea of you being punished forever and ever because of some arbitrary sins that you committed that pissed off your deity. And I fail to see how our mortal sins are, in relation to God's will. Like, I can understand why God would condemn mortal sins because of the implications of them, not because of the mortal sins themselves. Adultery and murder are not sins because adultery and murder in and of themselves are bad, but the end result, the force of which they empower. When we commit these actions, it compounds the demonic force that permeates and then becomes more dominant in the universe. In other words, we feed into these supernatural forces by our thoughts and our actions, and therefore our thoughts and actions must be good. They must be holy, or else they will feed those archdemons. And if they're feeding those archdemons, then they will become the new gods. And if they're the new gods, then we will all suffer. That is why we will burn in hell. Not because God sentences us there because we were a bad person, but because that will be the end result of a world that perpetuates evil, and then God will not be in a position to stop it. And that suggests that God is not omnipotent, which might be seen as blasphemous to some. But in my mind, it's not about power in a direct sense. We should not worship a God because it is all powerful. That sounds weak. That sounds fragile and petty. In my mind, it is about the principle of which we want to advocate and see more of. If we want to see our God be powerful, then we have to give Him power through our thoughts and our actions. And we have to, strengthen that idea of a better world. And by extension, then everything will work itself out, and then we will live in a heaven. But, in my mind, hell is not a place where people burn in eternal hellfire, and, it's just pain and suffering. That would suggest that they're self-aware of the fact that they're being punished, and that that's some semblance of justice. Even though I don't think it would be particularly justice to do it for eternity, there would be some semblance of justice in the fact that they're aware of the fact they were bad, and this is happening to them because they are bad. Given the evidence I have of human nature, that is not the case. They would be burning in eternal hellfire with a big shit grin on their face. To them, that would be the way things are supposed to be, the way things ought to be, and they would do everything in their power to continue to make it that way. People want to live in hell. People want to burn in eternal hellfire. That is their utmost desire, down to their very essence. Because if it wasn't, then why do they live their lives the way they do? Why do they think the thoughts that they think? That is my issue. My issue isn't that we will be punished and that it'll suck. My issue is that we will be punished, but we will love it. And that is, it's that sick and demented mentality that worries me. That is evil. Not in and of itself just shit happening to you. And you could explore that in some science fiction novels such as Orwellian's 1984, where at the end of the book he admits 2 + 2 = 5, and he loves Big Brother just as Big Brother's putting a gun to his head. That to me is hell. That to me is the force of the devil and things like that. Not so much just him tempting you to sin to get back at God, or because misery loves company, and just because the devil has to endure hell, he's going to make everyone else endure hell too, or something like that. That to me does not, as much as we're capable of thinking deeper into life's, ins and outs, you would think that they would think a little bit deeper than just this alien version of a child that, is pissed off at the parent and will do everything in their power to just aggravate the shit out of them. That to me does not seem like something that we would need to base our lives around and have religion for. We do not need to worship or, discuss so in depth those kinds of issues, because guess what? That happens here and now and nobody gives a shit. So, you have to think about the metaphysics. And in the metaphysics, it doesn't look good. And it doesn't look good not because there's like demons everywhere and blah blah blah, but because the very thought process of what we know to be sentient life forms just doesn't seem to lead to anything good. And that's why the Bible and the Quran and everything says that this world is inherently evil, and that the people of this world that are of God, that are God's people, will be rejected from it because they reject God. They reject that divinity. They reject that justice and that righteousness. And they will be in the minority. But is that proof that they are in the minority, that they are of God? And they have to remind themselves of that. The fact that if they are being condemned and they are being besmirched and ridiculed and things like that, then that proves they are different from this world and therefore better than this world. And you have to reject this world and all of its institutions, because all you need to do is just look at it and see the horrors that are hidden just underneath the surface. Even nature. Everyone likes to point out how beautiful nature is, and yeah, it is. But when you think about it, where does that beauty come from? It comes from struggle. It comes from animals eating each other. It comes from, bloody fighting and gore and death and destruction and hunger and just, it's conflict. It's pure warfare. And animals are vicious and mean and paranoid. They can't afford to go one day without thinking about where their next meal is going to come from and how they got to watch out for their young, or else something will come along and take them away. And their lives are meaningless, only a vessel for this hatred and this bitterness, because if they even let their guard down for 1 second, they will die. So knowing that, how can you see nature as beautiful? There's nothing beautiful about nature. It's just a series of destructive events. Even when the sun rises in the morning, what is the sun? The sun is a big ball of hydrogen that emanates pure radiation upon the earth. That, yes, it grows life because plantation and stuff feeds off that radiation. But it also tends to heat the earth and can actually destroy it, wither it away into nothing. So the very fact that we take a little piece of it and use it to live on, to continue suffering, is by no means good. It just means we get to live another day, to witness the fact that it gets worse. And that is the reality of our universe, of our everything. And the fact that once we leave this earth, it gets worse. The cold, destitute wasteland that is the entirety of the universe is just unfit for any life to live on. Even the most primitive of bacteria would struggle to live in such an environment. And it gets worse. There's cosmic backlash, quasars, supernovas, and things like that, black holes. The level of pure annihilation that is just around the corner is just unfathomable. And when you think about all this evil and all this death and immense hurt and pain and hate and suffering, it's hard to imagine anything could even spring from that, let alone in such an orderly fashion where it gets to continue living on. Maybe that's the miracle, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just playing tricks on us and it's just part of a sicker game to let us suffer more. Maybe it's both. Maybe there are conflicting spiritual ideas battling for supremacy. Maybe the idea of justice and stability and gratitude and worth and purpose is fighting with the will to make things suffer and pain and death and just entropy and irrationality. All these forces are just swirling around in a whirlwind. And in that whirlwind, maybe alien beings are born that symbolize godlike beings, and we worship them because we cannot imagine that such a being could exist that is practically immortal, that is able to carry out its will with a wave of its hand, and understands the psionic imprint that when they look at the neutrons, they begin to stabilize and things like that. I don't know if stabilize is a word, but you get what I'm saying here. The fact is that sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and from there we think of them as gods, but really they've just lived a whole lot longer. They've seen a whole lot more, and whether they're trying to enlighten us or just feed on us or kill us, or we're getting in the way of their progress and they're just going to wipe us out or whatever, it's just more of that. It gets worse. And that's why I would not advocate anyone worshiping anything, but at the same time not denying the existence of anything. Because if aliens came down from the sky tomorrow, what makes you think that they have your best interests at heart? You don't know. There is infinite possibilities, and the more likely they would be bad than good, given the evidence you have now. So, no, I would not welcome alien life forms. I would not welcome a spiritual encounter with some phantasm. I would not welcome anything beyond my understanding here and now in the moral realm. But that does not mean that I'm an atheist, but at the same time, I wish I was an atheist. I wish I could just disbelieve in all those things and just live my life as a guy, figuring, hey, this is the way things are. And for the most part, it is. I don't believe a lot of those ghost stories. I don't believe a lot of these encounters of getting probed and abducted by aliens. And if they did happen, they greatly exaggerate them so that they get on TV. And so I dismiss everything and I just take it with a grain of salt. I ignore it, try to look at it as though they're just full of shit or making shit up to get attention, and I try to remain neutral. I try to remain in a state of disbelief, because it just opens up a whole new can of worms if I go and believe in all this shit. So, I hope that gives you a better understanding. I'm not trying to convert anyone to anything. I am just merely pointing out that from my experience, that's the way the world works. That's the way everything works. Where it's just one dark force after another. And the only thing you can do in life is be self-aware of the fact that you're a puppet on the string. The only difference between my religion and somebody else's religion is I'm aware of the fact that I'm a puppet and I see my strings, and God willingly I can choose who's the one pulling my strings and pull the strings toward a better tomorrow, toward a more positive force rather than a more negative force. But that's the best I can hope for. That's the best I can hope for anybody. That's the best I can tell you right now, given my wisdom of theology. So I hope that helps clarify some questions of yours. And maybe in another video I will talk about my ethnic background and my ancestry, because it is deep and it does have a rich background. But like I said, I just don't want racist assholes going making presumptions about me. Not to mention this video was pretty long as it is, so maybe I'll make a part 2.